Get your black ass out of that seat right now." The words exploded through the first-class cabin like a gunshot. Captain Richard Hale didn't whisper. He didn't hesitate. He stood in the aisle of the commercial airline aircraft, one hand gripping the headrest of seat 1A, the other stabbing the air inches from the face of the man sitting there. "You really think you belong up here?" Hale sneered. "This isn't a charity flight. This is first class. Real money, real people. Not whatever this is." Several passengers gasped. Others froze. The man in seat 1A looked up slowly. His name was Daniel Brooks. Daniel was 58 years old, black, with deep brown skin weathered by time and responsibility. His hair was closely cropped, streaked with gray. He wore a simple navy jacket, pressed but modest. No designer logos, no visible status markers. His posture was upright, disciplined, shaped by decades of self-control rather than entitlement. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't flinch. Captain Richard Hale was 42, white, tall, and broad-shouldered, with the arrogant ease of a man who had spent his entire career being obeyed. He was a celebrity pilot, featured in airline commercials, praised in glossy magazines, known internally as the face of the brand. Privilege clung to him like cologne. Hale laughed sharply. "What, you're deaf too? I said move, before I have security drag you out like the problem you are." Daniel blinked once. "Sir," he said calmly, "I paid for this seat." Hale burst out laughing. "That's adorable. You hear that?" he said, turning to the cabin. "He paid for it." A few nervous chuckles followed. Most people stayed silent. Hale leaned closer, his voice dropping into a poisonous mockery. "Let me guess. You saved up, right? Thought today was the day you'd pretend you're one of us?" Daniel's jaw tightened, but only slightly. "This seat," Hale continued loudly, "is for executives, investors, people who make this commercial airline money, not some guy who looks like he wandered out of economy hoping no one would notice." A woman near the aisle shifted uncomfortably. Someone raised a phone. Daniel kept his hands folded in his lap. "I have a valid boarding pass," he said evenly. "And as far as I understand, airline policy—" "Oh, don't start quoting policy," Hale snapped. "Passenger rights don't mean you get to cosplay as first class." The words hit hard. Hale straightened and addressed the cabin like a performer. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the delay. We seem to have a passenger who doesn't understand boundaries." He turned back to Daniel, eyes cold. "People like you always want to make everything about race. This isn't racism. This is standards." Daniel finally stood, slowly, deliberately, so no one could accuse him of aggression. "I'm not making anything about race," he said. "You are." That set Hale off. "Oh, here we go," he scoffed. "The calm voice, the wounded dignity act. You think that scares me? I fly planes worth hundreds of millions of dollars. You're just another headache." He leaned in, voice low and vicious. "And frankly, you make the other passengers uncomfortable." Daniel glanced around. No one spoke. "Do you feel uncomfortable?" Daniel asked the cabin quietly. No answer. Hale snapped his fingers toward a flight attendant. "Call airport security, now. This guy is refusing to comply." The attendant hesitated, eyes flicking between them. "Captain, his seat—" "I don't care what the seat says," Hale barked. "I'm responsible for safety, and I don't feel safe with him sitting here." The implication was unmistakable. Daniel inhaled slowly. He had lived this moment before. Different rooms, different uniforms, same tone. A worn leather wallet slipped from his jacket pocket and landed softly on the carpet as he shifted his stance. Hale smirked. "Can't even keep your junk together." Daniel bent, picked it up, and slid it back into his pocket without breaking eye contact. "For the record," Daniel said, "I followed every rule." Hale laughed again, louder this time. "Rules? This airline wasn't built for people like you, and today you're getting off this plane." Security appeared at the front of the cabin. Hale folded his arms, satisfied. "See? Consequences." Daniel looked past him, out the window. The runway stretched endlessly. Planes waiting, engines silent, everything governed by systems most people never questioned. A verse surfaced in his mind, steady and grounding. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Exodus 14:14. Daniel exhaled. He turned back to Hale. If you believe you're right, he said quietly, then do what you think the system allows. Hale leaned back, smug. Oh, I will. But for the first time, something flickered behind his eyes. Uncertainty. If you've ever been humiliated for simply existing, then what happens next with Captain Hale will make your blood boil. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with Dignity Voices, because in Scene 2, privilege doesn't just collide with dignity, it doubles down. This isn't just one man abusing power anymore, it's the institution stepping in to help him finish the job. Airport security arrived with practiced indifference. Two officers stepped into the first-class cabin, shoulders relaxed, hands resting near their belts. Not tense, not urgent. This wasn't danger. This was housekeeping. Captain Hale straightened the moment he saw them, authority slipping back onto him like a tailored jacket. Gentlemen, he said, nodding toward Daniel, this passenger is refusing crew instructions and disrupting operations. Daniel turned slowly. That's not accurate. Hale cut him off. You've had enough time to talk? The older officer glanced between them. Sir, we're going to need you to step into the aisle. Daniel complied immediately. That seemed to irritate Hale even more. See? Hale said, smirking. Always cooperative when the uniforms show up. The younger officer scanned Daniel with a look that lingered just a second too long. What's the issue, sir? Hale answered before Daniel could speak. He doesn't belong in first class. Crew discretion. Airline policy. The words worked like a password. The older officer nodded slowly. Sir, he said to Daniel, can I see your boarding pass? Daniel handed it over again. The scanner beeped. Clean. Valid. Seat 1A. The officer frowned slightly. Everything checks out. Hale exhaled loudly, theatrical. That's not the point. Policy allows the captain to remove any passenger who makes the flight unsafe. Unsafe how? Daniel asked calmly. Hale's jaw tightened. Don't play games. I'm not, Daniel replied. I'm asking for clarity. The younger officer shifted. Captain, has he threatened anyone? No. Refused instructions? He's questioning them. Daniel met the officer's eyes. Asking questions is not refusal. Hale laughed harshly. You hear that? He's lawyering us now. Several passengers were openly recording. No one hid it anymore. Hale noticed. Phone's down, he snapped. This is a secure environment. No one moved. The older officer lowered his voice. Captain, we need a concrete reason. Hale's lips curled. He leaned in closer to Daniel, making sure the microphones on nearby phones could still catch it. He fits the profile, Hale said quietly. The words landed heavy. Daniel felt the room stiffen. Which profile? Daniel asked. Hale shrugged. You know, the kind that turns everything into a scene, the kind that sues, the kind that plays the victim card and, calls it courage. That's not a policy, Daniel said. Hale straightened. It's experience. The younger officer looked uncomfortable now. Sir, maybe we can... Hale cut him off. Do your job. The older officer sighed. Sir, he said to Daniel, to avoid further disruption, we're asking you to deplane. Daniel nodded once. Under protest. Hale laughed. Of course you are. Daniel took one step toward the exit, then paused. Before I go, he said, voice level, I'd like to know if this decision is being documented. The officer blinked. Documented? Yes, Daniel said. Names, times, statements. Hale rolled his eyes. Unbelievable. You people always think you're building a case. Daniel turned to him. I'm building a record. Something flickered in Hale's expression. Gone almost instantly. Escort him out, Hale snapped. As Daniel walked forward, murmurs rippled through the cabin. This isn't right. He didn't do anything. Why him? No one said it loudly enough to stop it. At the aircraft door, Daniel stopped again. He turned back, not toward Hale, but toward the passengers. "I appreciate those of you who noticed," he said quietly. Hale scoffed. "Oh, spare us the speech." Daniel ignored him. He looked at the phones, the faces, the silence that had chosen comfort over courage. Then he stepped off the plane. The door closed behind him with a dull, final thud. Hale exhaled, triumphant. "Finally, we're clear." But the plane didn't move. Minutes passed. 5, 10. Whispers grew restless. A flight attendant approached the cockpit. "Captain, operations is asking for a delay explanation." Hale waved her off. "Tell them it's resolved." She hesitated. "They said it's flagged." Hale frowned. "Flagged how?" She swallowed. "Compliance flagged." Hale stiffened. "That doesn't make sense." Another attendant hurried up, phone in hand. "Captain, corporate is calling." Hale snatched the phone. "This better be quick." His smile faded as he listened. "What do you mean, hold position?" he snapped. "We removed the passenger." Pause. Hale's face tightened. "No, you don't need details. He was disruptive." Longer pause. A bead of sweat formed at his temple. "You're grounding the aircraft?" he whispered. The passengers felt it before they understood it. Something had shifted. Hale lowered the phone slowly. He forced a laugh that fooled no one. "Minor delay," he announced. "Technical check." But his eyes darted toward the door Daniel had exited through. Outside the aircraft, Daniel stood alone at the gate. His phone vibrated. Once, twice. He didn't look at it. He watched the plane instead, still, waiting, caught in a system far larger than one man's ego. Hale glanced at the security officers. "Why are you still here?" The older officer checked his radio. "We were told to remain." "Told by who?" A voice crackled through the intercom, calm and unmistakably official. "Captain Hale, this is airline operations. Please stand by for further instruction." Hale swallowed. For the first time, the cabin saw it. Fear. If you've ever watched the system protect the wrong person, stay with us. Like. Subscribe. Because the humiliation doesn't stay behind closed doors, it goes public, and the world starts watching. The gate should have been loud. Airports always were. Rolling luggage, impatient footsteps, voices layered over announcements. But this gate had gone unnaturally quiet, as if the space itself sensed something wrong and decided to hold its breath. Daniel stood near the boarding door, flanked loosely by security. Not handcuffed, not restrained, still marked. Captain Hale stepped off the aircraft with practiced authority, jacket straight, expression carved, into professional indignation. He didn't see a crowd. He saw an audience. "There he is," Hale announced, loud enough for phones to capture. "The passenger who delayed our flight." A ripple moved through the onlookers. Daniel felt it instantly. The shift from curiosity to suspicion. It was an old maneuver. Name the problem. Point to the body. Let the crowd fill in the blanks. "That's not accurate," Daniel said calmly. Hale laughed, short and contemptuous. "You had your say already." A woman near the gate frowned. "I was on that plane. He didn't cause anything." Hale turned sharply. "Ma'am, unless you're part of flight operations, I suggest you mind your business." Several phones lifted higher. The gate supervisor hurried over, eyes darting between Hale and the gathering crowd. "Captain, corporate is requesting an incident summary." Hale waved him off. "I'll handle it." Daniel took a step forward, not aggressively, but deliberately, planting himself where the cameras could no longer pretend he wasn't there. "I was seated where my boarding pass assigned me," Daniel said, voice steady. "I was removed without explanation." Hale scoffed. "You're leaving out the part where you refused to comply." Daniel met his eyes. "I asked for clarification." "That's refusal," Hale snapped. A man in the crowd muttered, "That's not refusal." Hale ignored it. "This is a commercial airline. We don't negotiate safety." Daniel nodded slightly. Then explain the risk. Hale's jaw tightened. You were disruptive. How? Daniel asked. Hale paused, just long enough. Phones caught it. The pause said more than words ever could. You questioned authority, Hale said finally. Daniel exhaled slowly. Authority isn't the same as correctness. A murmur spread through the crowd. Hale's face reddened. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Turning everything into a spectacle. A young woman near the front raised her phone. We didn't start recording. You did. Hale snapped, Put that away. No one listened. The gate supervisor swallowed. Captain, the social media engagement is climbing. Hale rounded on him. I don't care. But he did. Everyone could see it. Daniel felt the moment tightening, pressure building not against him, but around Hale. The system had been comfortable in shadows. Cameras changed that. Sir, a security officer said quietly to Daniel. We're just trying to keep order. Daniel nodded. So am I. Hale laughed again, too loudly. Unbelievable. Now he's the reasonable one. Daniel turned toward the crowd. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten anyone. I didn't violate any written policy. Hale stepped closer, teeth clenched. Stop performing. Daniel met him halfway. Stop accusing. For a split second, Hale looked like he might explode. Then a voice cut through. Captain Hale? A woman in a blazer pushed forward. Airline legal counsel, judging by the badge clipped to her lapel. Her expression was tight, professional, wary. We need statements, she said. Immediately, Hale scoffed. This is unnecessary. She didn't look at him. Not anymore. Daniel watched realization flicker across Hale's face. Phones buzzed in unison. Someone whispered, Look, Twitter. Another voice. This is going viral. Hale straightened, attempting control. Let's not jump to conclusions. Daniel spoke softly, but the microphones caught it. Conclusions happen when facts are ignored. Hale snapped, You're accusing us of something serious. Daniel nodded. Yes. The word landed heavy. What exactly? The legal counsel asked. Daniel chose his words carefully. When a passenger is humiliated publicly without cause, when discretion becomes discrimination, when policy is invoked selectively, that's not judgment. He paused. That's corporate negligence. The crowd went still. Hale barked a laugh. That's ridiculous, Daniel continued, unwavering. And when leadership refuses to acknowledge it, the company exposes itself to legal accountability. The legal counsel's lips pressed into a thin line. Hale turned on Daniel. You think you're some kind of hero? Daniel shook his head. No, I think systems should be better than the people who abuse them. A man near the back said quietly, Damn. The PA system chimed, then crackled to life. Attention passengers at Gate 47. All departures are temporarily suspended pending compliance review. The words echoed across the terminal. Hale froze. The legal counsel checked her phone. Captain, corporate has issued a hold. Full review, external. Hale stared at her. Because of him? She hesitated. Because of everything. Hale's confidence drained visibly now, like air from a punctured tire. This is an overreaction. Daniel spoke again, gently. It's a correction. Hale leaned in close, voice shaking with restrained fury. You wanted a scene. Congratulations. Daniel met his gaze. I wanted fairness. The crowd shifted, not away from Daniel, but toward him. Someone clapped once, then stopped, embarrassed. Another voice called out, He didn't do anything wrong. Hale looked around, suddenly aware he was alone. Daniel felt the weight of the moment, not triumph, but gravity. This wasn't revenge. This was exposure. A verse surfaced in his mind, steady and unavoidable. Truthful lips endure forever, but a lying tongue lasts only a moment. Proverbs 12:19. He closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, Hale was staring at the floor. Security stepped back, not from Daniel, but from Hale. The gate supervisor cleared his throat. "Captain, we need you to step aside." Hale looked up sharply. "You can't be serious." "I am," the supervisor said. Daniel didn't smile. He didn't move. The system was finally doing what it was designed to do. Slowly, imperfectly, but publicly. And everyone was watching. If you've ever watched truth fight its way into daylight, stay with us. Like, subscribe. Because Daniel doesn't celebrate, he goes silent. And that silence becomes the most dangerous thing in the room. Silence settled like pressure. Not the awkward kind. This was heavier, deliberate. It pressed against the gate, the plane, the people who moments earlier had been so sure of themselves. The PA system had gone quiet. Phones still hovered, but even recording felt uncertain now, like documenting something sacred or dangerous. Daniel stood where he was. He didn't move when the supervisor asked Captain Hale to step aside. He didn't react when Hale muttered protests under his breath. He didn't acknowledge the bee, shifting balance at all. That was the mistake everyone kept making. They thought power announced itself. Hale stood near the counter, arms crossed, jaw tight, eyes darting. He kept waiting for the next accusation, the next speech, the next demand, something loud enough to push back against. It never came. Daniel simply watched, not with anger, not with triumph, with clarity. The security officers shifted their weight, suddenly unsure where they belonged. One of them avoided Hale's eyes entirely. The other pretended to check his radio, fingers fidgeting. The gate supervisor cleared his throat. "Sir," he said to Daniel, "we're going to need to ask you a few questions." Daniel nodded once. "Of course." The difference was subtle, but undeniable. Minutes ago, he'd been the problem. Now, he was being consulted. Hale noticed it too. "You're really enjoying this, aren't you?" Hale snapped, unable to stand the quiet any longer. Daniel turned to him. Slowly. "Enjoying what?" "This," Hale said, gesturing wildly. "Standing there like you won something." Daniel didn't raise his voice. "I didn't win anything." Hale scoffed. "Then why won't you say something?" Daniel held his gaze. "Because," he said calmly, "everything that needed to be said already was." That unsettled Hale more than shouting ever could. The legal counsel approached Daniel, tablet in hand. "Sir, we'd like to clarify the timeline." Daniel nodded again. "Take your time." She hesitated. "Most passengers—" "Don't say that." Daniel offered a faint smile. "Most passengers don't need to." Hale's eyes narrowed. "Who do you think you are?" Daniel studied him for a moment, not assessing, not judging, simply recognizing. "Someone who understands how systems work," he said. Hale laughed bitterly. "You keep saying that like it's supposed to scare me." "It's not," Daniel replied. "It's supposed to reassure me." The words landed softly and struck hard. The legal counsel typed something into her tablet. Her fingers moved faster now. The supervisor leaned in, whispering to her. She nodded once, then looked up at Hale. "Captain," she said evenly, "we'll need your statement as well." Hale bristled. "I've already given it." "We'll need it again," she said, "for the record." Daniel watched Hale's confidence erode, not dramatically, but in small, telling ways. The way his shoulders stiffened, the way his breathing shortened, the way he glanced at the crowd and realized they weren't on his side anymore. He remembered men like Hale, not monsters, not villains in their own minds, just men who had never been told no. A woman in the crowd whispered to her friend, "Why isn't he saying anything?" Daniel heard it. He chose not to answer. Silence was doing the work. A message vibrated in his pocket. Then another. He didn't look. Hale noticed. "What, you waiting for backup?" Daniel met his eyes. "No." "Then what?" Daniel considered the question. "For you to finish." Hale clenched his fists. "Finish what?" "Showing everyone who you are." That did it. Hale stepped forward. "You think standing there makes you righteous? You think you're above this?" Daniel didn't move. "I think you confused authority with entitlement." The crowd inhaled sharply. The legal counsel looked up. "Captain, please." Hale rounded on her. "You're taking his side now?" "I'm taking the company's side," she said quietly. Daniel felt the shift then. Not loud, not celebratory. Structural. The system was no longer protecting Hale automatically. It was evaluating him. Hale sensed it too. "This is insane," he muttered. "I followed protocol." Daniel spoke, almost kindly. "You followed instinct." Hale looked up. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," Daniel said, "you didn't ask whether you were right. You asked whether you could." The words cut deep. Hale opened his mouth to respond, then closed it. Nothing he said would sound good now. A supervisor's voice came through the radio. "Gate 47, prepare for internal review team arrival." Hale's eyes widened. Internal review? Daniel finally looked down, briefly, at his phone. No message preview, no smile, just confirmation. He slid the phone back into his pocket. Hale watched him, suspicion dawning. "You knew this was coming." Daniel shook his head. "I trusted it would." That was worse. The crowd had fallen completely silent now. Even the phones seemed steadier, more respectful. This wasn't spectacle anymore. It was reckoning. Quiet, procedural, inevitable. Hale backed up a step, bumping into the counter. "You don't get to judge me," Daniel replied softly. "I didn't." "Then who did?" Hale demanded. Daniel met his eyes. "You did," he said. The words echoed. A junior manager approached, nervous. "Captain, corporate wants you to wait here." Hale laughed once, short, hollow. "For what?" No one answered. Daniel felt something loosen in his chest. Not satisfaction, not relief. Acceptance. This was the moment he'd learned to recognize over decades in rooms like this. The moment power stopped shouting and started listening. He turned toward the windows lining the terminal. Outside, planes waited patiently on the tarmac, lights blinking in sequence, systems humming, each movement governed by rules that didn't care who you were, only what you did. That was the beauty of it. Justice didn't rush. It aligned. Behind him, Hale said quietly, "You planned this." Daniel didn't turn around. "No," he said, "you revealed it." The silence returned, but this time, it belonged to Daniel. Gate 47 had lost its sense of place. What should have been a corridor of motion, boarding passes flashing, wheels rolling, voices overlapping, had become something else entirely. A holding chamber, a pause pressed flat by expectation. Outside the glass, the aircraft waited with engines dark, a metal body restrained by rules invisible to most people until they mattered. Daniel stood a few steps back from the counter, neither isolated nor surrounded. He hadn't moved since the hold was announced. He hadn't needed to. Stillness had done the work. Captain Hale paced once, then stopped. Adjusted his cuffs, smoothed the front of his jacket. He kept glancing toward the terminal entrance, as if rescue might arrive in uniform or authority might reassert itself with a signature and a smile. His confidence hadn't vanished. It had fractured, splintering into habits that no longer held. 3 figures appeared at the edge of the gate. They did not rush. They did not speak loudly. They did not wear airline colors. A woman in a navy blazer led the way tablet tucked beneath her arm. 2 men followed, each carrying a slim black case. Their pace was unhurried, their expressions neutral, their presence unmistakable. The gate supervisor noticed first. He straightened, breath catching. "Compliance," he murmured. Hale scoffed under his breath. "You've got to be kidding me." The woman stopped several feet from Daniel. Not Hale. "Sir," she said, voice measured, respectful. "Thank you for your patience." The words rippled through the crowd. "Not sir, but thank you." Hale laughed sharply. "You're thanking him now? He's the reason this flight's a mess." She did not look at him. "For the record," she continued, eyes on Daniel, "we need to verify your identity." Daniel nodded once. "Of course." Hale's smile returned. brittle and defensive. Identity? What is this? A guessing game? Daniel reached into his jacket. The movement was slow, deliberate. Every phone found it. Every eye followed it. He removed a worn leather wallet, the same one that had fallen in the cabin earlier, the same one Hale had mocked, and opened it carefully. There was no flourish, no pause for effect. Inside was a federal identification badge, plain, official, unmistakable. The woman leaned forward slightly, reading. One of the men beside her glanced, then straightened. The other checked a detail on his tablet. "Confirmed," the woman said calmly. "Daniel Brooks, director." A hush fell so complete it felt engineered. Hale froze. "That's not real," he said reflexively. "That's fake." Daniel closed the wallet and slid it back into his jacket. "It isn't." The woman turned at last to face Hale. "Captain Richard Hale," she said evenly. "This individual is the sitting director of the Federal Aviation Administration." The words landed like gravity. Silent, absolute, inescapable. Phones trembled in hands. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Another voice, lower. He warned him. Hale stared at Daniel, seeing him again, this time without the story he'd built around him. The posture, the calm, the refusal to rise to bait. All of it rearranged itself. Hale began, then stopped. His throat worked. "You let me." Daniel met his eyes. "Speak?" Hale's face flushed. "You could have said something." Daniel's voice was level, almost gentle. "You never asked who I was." "That's not." Hale shook his head, searching for traction. "You knew what you were doing." Daniel paused. He chose precision. "I knew what you were doing." The compliance officer opened her tablet. "Captain Hale, your conduct during boarding, passenger interaction, and security escalation is now under federal review." Hale laughed once, too loudly. "For enforcing standards?" "For violating them," she replied, repeatedly. Hale turned toward Daniel, anger bleeding into panic. "You wanted this?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. When he did, it was simple. "I wanted to get to my seat." That sentence broke the room. No accusation, no sermon, just the truth stripped of drama. Hale's shoulders sagged, a fraction. "You humiliated me." Daniel nodded once. "Yes." Hale looked up, stunned. "You admit it?" "I acknowledge it," Daniel said, "because humiliation happened." He held Hale's gaze. "The difference is who chose it." The crowd leaned forward as one body. "You chose to humiliate me publicly," Daniel continued. "I chose not to stop you." Silence followed, thick, undeniable. The compliance officer spoke again. "Captain Hale, effective immediately. Your flight privileges are suspended pending investigation." Hale laughed again, hollow now. "You can't do that at a gate." She met his eyes. "We just did." Security shifted, subtle, decisive, positioning themselves between Hale and Daniel. The line had moved, and everyone felt it. Hale noticed. "This is insane. I've flown for this airline for 20 years. Daniel replied gently. "And in all that time, no one ever told you no." Hale snapped, "You're enjoying this." Daniel shook his head. "I'm enduring it." That landed harder than any raised voice could have. Outside, the plane remained still. Daniel felt the crowd's attention change, from suspicion to recognition. He hadn't shouted, he hadn't threatened, he hadn't revealed himself until the system forced the truth into daylight. A verse surfaced in his mind, steady as breath. "Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall." Proverbs 16:18. He closed his eyes briefly, then opened them. The compliance officer turned to Daniel. "Sir, we'll need your formal statement." Daniel nodded. "You'll have it." Hale took a step forward, desperation cracking through. "You don't have to do this." Daniel met his eyes. "I already didn't." The words settled with finality. The compliance team began issuing quiet instructions, Access revoked, reports initiated, calls placed. No spectacle, no shouting. The system didn't rage, it corrected. Daniel stepped back and let it work. A woman in the crowd whispered. He never once raised his voice. Daniel heard it. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. If you've ever been underestimated by someone who thought they owned the room, stay with us. Like, subscribe. Because justice stops being symbolic, and the system executes consequences that cannot be undone. Justice did not storm the terminal. It settled into it. Gate 47 remained frozen in a state that airports were never meant to hold. Neither departure nor delay, neither chaos nor calm. The aircraft outside the glass sat tethered to the jet bridge like a thought paused mid-sentence. Engines cold, lights idle. Ground crew waited with radios lowered, already informed that movement would come later, if at all. Inside, the energy shifted again. The crowd thinned, not because curiosity had faded, but because instinct had taken over. People sensed that something official had begun, something that did not invite commentary or spectacle. Phones lowered, voices hushed. What remained was attention. Daniel sat at a narrow table positioned near the windows. He had chosen it deliberately, not hidden, not elevated, just visible enough to be part of the record. His posture was steady, hands resting flat, eyes attentive but detached. He had learned long ago that real authority didn't need posture or volume. It needed alignment. Across from him, the compliance team assembled in silence. Tablets unlocked, timestamps verified, names logged. This was no interrogation. It was documentation in motion. Several yards away, Captain Hale sat alone. Not detained, not restrained, just irrelevant. The woman in the navy blazer began without ceremony. For the record, she said evenly, this review concerns operational conduct, escalation authority, and compliance with federal aviation standards. Her voice carried, not because it was loud, but because nothing interrupted it. She turned slightly toward Daniel. Director Brooks, you are welcome to observe. Your formal statement will be requested later. Daniel nodded once. She turned back to Hale. Captain Hale, she said, please recount your actions from initial passenger interaction through removal. Hale straightened, reflexively reaching for the shape of authority that had always answered him. I enforced safety, he said. The compliance officer waited a beat. Define safety. Hale hesitated. Passenger behavior. Which behavior? She asked. He challenged crew authority. The sound of typing followed. Slow, precise. Captain, she said, challenging authority is not a safety violation under federal aviation standards. Hale's jaw tightened. You're splitting hairs. No, she replied calmly. We're defining thresholds. Another officer spoke. You escalated to airport security. On what grounds? Hale inhaled sharply. Crew discretion. Please cite the clause, the officer said. Silence. I don't have it memorized, Hale said finally. Understood, the officer replied. Noted, discretionary authority invoked without citation. Daniel watched quietly. This was the part most people never saw, the moment when instinct collided with record, where tone and implication dissolved under scrutiny. An airline executive arrived mid-session, face tight, tie loosened. He stopped short when he saw the grounded aircraft, the compliance team, Daniel seated at the table. Understanding dawned, unwelcome and immediate. Director Brooks, the executive said carefully, extending his hand. Daniel stood and shook it once. Neutral, controlled. We were unaware. You were traveling today, the executive said. Daniel met his eyes. Awareness isn't a prerequisite for accountability. The executive swallowed and turned toward the compliance officer. Where are we? Preliminary findings indicate procedural deviation and improper escalation, she replied. A full audit is now active. The executive turned to Hale. Richard, Hale snapped. He provoked me. Daniel remained silent. The executive exhaled slowly. Richard, what exactly happened? Hale's voice dropped. I did my job. Daniel spoke then, not to Hale, but to the executive. Your pilot exercised power without verification. The executive stiffened. That, Daniel continued, is where systems fail. The compliance officer tapped her tablet. Internal dashboards populated across the airline's network. Training acknowledgements, past incident reports, passenger complaints previously categorized as isolated, now aligned. Hale, notice the shift. What is that? Context, the officer replied. This is a witch hunt, Hale said bitterly. Daniel responded evenly. It's a pattern. The officer looked up. Captain Hale, there are multiple documented complaints over several years involving language, tone, and escalation. Hale scoffed. Those were nothing. They were dismissed, she corrected. Not cleared. The executive's face drained of color. Based on today's incident and historical data, the officer continued, we are issuing an immediate temporary suspension of Captain Hale's flight privileges pending formal review. Hale stood abruptly. You can't do that here. Yes, she said calmly. We can. Security stepped forward, not forcefully, not urgently, simply present. The executive closed his eyes for a brief moment. Richard, your badge. Hale stared at him, disbelief cracking into fear. You're serious? The executive didn't answer. Hale unclipped his badge with trembling fingers and placed it on the counter. The sound it made was small, but absolute. Daniel felt no satisfaction, only order. The compliance team continued, devices logged, access revoked, statements scheduled. The machinery of accountability moved without emotion, without pause. It did not punish. It corrected. The executive turned to Daniel. Are you ordering the aircraft grounded? Daniel shook his head. No, a beat. I'm allowing the process to complete, Daniel said. There's a difference. The compliance officer nodded. Aircraft remains grounded pending audit conclusion. Outside the glass, the plane stayed still. Passengers nearby watched quietly. No cheering, no outrage. Just recognition that something rare was happening. A system doing exactly what it was designed to do. Daniel checked his phone for the first time. One message. One word. Proceed. He placed the phone face down. Director Brooks, the officer said, we'll need your formal statement within the hour. Daniel nodded. You'll have it. Would you like counsel present? No, Daniel replied. The facts are enough. Hale, slumped now, looked up weakly. You're destroying my life. Daniel met his eyes, not cold, not triumphant. No, he said quietly. I'm recording it. The executive flinched at the precision. Final instructions were issued, oversight bodies notified, hearings scheduled, timelines locked. Justice did not shout. It aligned. Daniel stood and walked toward the windows once more. On the tarmac, equipment rolled away from the aircraft. The jet bridge remained attached. Time waited. Behind him, Captain Hale sat alone, no longer powerful, no longer protected, no longer confused, just documented. Daniel did not look back. The system was moving now, and it would not stop. The collapse did not look like chaos. It looked like silence spreading. By the time the sun dipped below the skyline, the incident at Gate 47 had already left the terminal and entered spaces far more dangerous to power. Executive boardrooms, legal briefings, regulatory inboxes marked priority. What had started as a single act of unchecked authority was now being examined as evidence of something larger, something systemic. Inside airline headquarters, the lights stayed on. Conference rooms filled slowly, not with panic, but with gravity. Senior leaders sat shoulder to shoulder around long tables, documents spread in front of them like pieces of a puzzle no one wanted to finish assembling. Incident logs, training acknowledgements, passenger complaints that had once been closed individually, quietly, comfortably. Now they were laid side by side. A senior board member broke the stillness. How many times has this happened? No one answered. Legal counsel cleared her throat. More than once, she said carefully. Enough to establish pattern. That word, pattern, hung in the room longer than any accusation could have. Memos went out before midnight. Not public statements, internal directives, temporary suspensions, mandatory retraining, expanded compliance reviews that reached beyond one flight, one pilot, one moment. The system had stopped asking who embarrassed us and started asking why we protected it. At the airport, Gate 47 returned to function. Announcements resumed. Boarding groups were called. The physical rhythm of travel returned as if nothing had happened. But people who had been there moved differently now. They spoke in lower voices. They lingered at the edge of the space longer than necessary, as if the place itself carried memory. "He never raised his voice," someone said quietly. "That's why it worked," another replied. Daniel watched none of this directly. He sat alone in a small lounge overlooking the runway, untouched coffee cooling in front of him. He had chosen the seat because it faced outward, forward. The tarmac stretched endlessly beyond the glass, lights forming precise lines of order and direction. His phone lay face down beside the cup. He had read the messages earlier. There was nothing left to read. The system was moving now. Hours later, Captain Hale was escorted out of the terminal. Not in handcuffs, not in disgrace, but in something heavier. The silence around him was deliberate, institutional, complete. His uniform was still pressed, his posture still practiced, but the authority that once wrapped around him like armor was gone. As he passed a wall of glass, he caught his reflection. For the first time, he did not see a pilot. He saw a man who had mistaken power for immunity. The realization came too late to stop anything, but early enough to hurt. He did not look back. By morning, the headlines had settled into clarity. Not outrage, not spectacle. Airline suspends senior pilot pending federal review. FAA confirms. Oversight. After passenger removal incident, carrier launches, system-wide compliance audit. The story endured because it did not scream. It spoke calmly, precisely. Inside the airline, the ripple widened. Training manuals were revised overnight. Language policies rewritten in unambiguous terms. Supervisors received quiet directives that discretion was not protection, and authority did not mean exemption. Morning briefings felt different. Some pilots bristled. Others sat in thoughtful silence. One veteran captain finally spoke. "We fly machines that forgive nothing," he said. "Maybe we shouldn't expect people to." No one disagreed. At the airport, Daniel walked through the terminal unescorted. No announcement followed him. No camera crew waited. To most, he was just another traveler. To some, he was something else. A woman near a coffee stand nodded to him. A man passing murmured, "Thank you." Daniel acknowledged neither with words. A nod was enough. He paused. Again near the windows. Planes lifted smoothly into the sky, wheels retracting in perfect sequence, movements governed by systems that did not care who you were, only what you did. That was the part of aviation Daniel had always trusted most. Not people, processes. A young flight attendant approached hesitantly. "Sir?" Daniel turned. "I was there," she said. "When it happened." He waited. "I didn't say anything," she continued. "I froze." Daniel nodded once. "You noticed." She frowned slightly. "That doesn't feel like enough." "It is," Daniel said gently. "Noticing is where change starts. Speaking comes next." She breathed out, lighter, and walked away. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. A verse his father used to repeat during quiet evenings surfaced, not as instruction but as truth already lived. The one who walks in integrity walks securely, but the one who takes crooked paths will be found out. Proverbs 10:9. He opened his eyes. The system had found its crooked path, and for once, it had not turned away. Across the industry, the echo continued. Other airlines took notice. Quiet emails circulated. Policies were reviewed preemptively. No one wanted to be next. Accountability, Daniel knew, was contagious when it was visible. This was not collapse as destruction. It was collapse as correction. Daniel understood something else, too, something the headlines would never capture. This moment would not fix everything, but it would fix enough. Enough to make the next pilot hesitate before speaking in contempt. Enough to make the next supervisor pause before dismissing a complaint. Enough to remind the next bystander that silence was a choice, and so was courage. That was how systems healed. Not instantly, not completely, but irreversibly. Daniel gathered his coat and stood. As he walked away from the window, a pilot approaching from the opposite direction slowed, then stopped. The man met Daniel's eyes and nodded. Deep, respectful, unspoken. "Sir," the pilot said quietly. Daniel returned the nod and kept walking. Behind him, the airline moved forward, changed not by humiliation, but by exposure. Not purified, but aware. And awareness, Daniel believed, was the beginning of wisdom. The world did not cheer. It did not need to. Justice had done its work. Quietly, completely. The airport looked the same. That was the first thing Daniel noticed. The same polished floors, the same rhythm of rolling suitcases, the same soft echo of announcements drifting through the terminal like distant waves. Months had passed since Gate 47, since the silence that had reshaped an entire airline. Yet the world had not stopped turning. Justice rarely leaves visible scars. Daniel walked slowly this time, unhurried, no destination pressing against him. He wore the same quiet clothes he always had, not because he needed to prove humility, but because power had never lived in fabric or symbols for him. At a cafe near the windows, a news screen played silently. A headline scrolled across the bottom. Airline finalizes settlement agreement following FAA review. Daniel paused, reading without expression. The report was factual, controlled, careful. It spoke of compliance reforms, leadership changes, and a formal executive apology issued by the airline's board. It mentioned steps taken toward brand accountability, the restructuring of internal training, and new oversight measures designed to rebuild trust. The anchor used the phrase reputation management, a clinical term stripped of emotion. Daniel understood why. Corporations preferred language that softened consequence. But he also knew something deeper had already occurred, something no headline could fully capture. The system had been forced to look at itself. He took a seat by the window, watching planes lift into the sky one by one. Each takeoff followed the same rules, the same invisible mathematics of lift and trust. No pilot was above them, no passenger exempt. That was how it should be. A man approached hesitantly, middle-aged, airline executive by the cut of his suit, the caution in his posture. "Director Brooks?" he asked. Daniel looked up. "Yes." "I didn't want to interrupt," the man said. "I just wanted to say, the board meant the apology." Daniel nodded. "Apologies matter when behavior changes." The man exhaled, relieved and uneasy at the same time. "We're working on it." Daniel met his eyes. "Then keep working." No handshake. No ceremony. The man walked away, understanding that forgiveness was not a press release. It was a process. Daniel returned his gaze to the runway. He thought about Captain Hale, not with satisfaction, not with resentment. Hale had faded from the headlines weeks ago, replaced by policy updates and quarterly reports. His career had ended quietly, the way arrogance often does when stripped of attention. Daniel did not pray for his downfall. He prayed for his clarity. Grace did not mean erasing consequences. It meant releasing hatred. A verse surfaced in Daniel's mind, steady and grounding, one his mother used to repeat during moments of injustice. "Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good." Romans 12:21. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. The settlement agreement had closed the legal chapter. The executive apology had closed the public one. Brand accountability had been promised. Reputation management would continue, as it always did. But moral accountability, that was something else entirely. That lived in choices made when no one was watching. Daniel stood and walked once more through the terminal. At Gate 47, a different flight boarded now. Different crew, different passengers. The gate agent scanned passes efficiently, professionally. No raised voices, no assumptions, just order. Daniel smiled faintly. Not because justice had been loud, but because it had been right. As he passed through security, a young man behind him whispered to his friend, "That's him." Daniel heard it. He didn't turn around. Power did not need acknowledgement. Outside, the sky stretched wide and blue. Daniel paused for a moment before exiting the terminal, feeling the quiet satisfaction of alignment, of knowing that dignity had held without shouting, that truth had surfaced without spectacle. This was moral grace, not revenge, not victory, but peace earned through restraint. This story isn't about an airline. It's about how power behaves when it thinks no one is watching. True justice doesn't scream. It doesn't humiliate. It doesn't seek applause. It corrects. God's word reminds us that dignity is not something granted by systems. It's something sustained by character. When we respond to injustice with restraint instead of rage, we force the world to confront itself. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever been silenced, if you've ever been humiliated for simply existing, remember this. You don't have to shout to be powerful. You don't have to retaliate to be right. And you don't have to lose your soul to win your dignity. If stories like this speak to your spirit, if you believe in quiet strength, moral courage, and justice done the right way, subscribe to Dignity Voices, like this story, and share it with someone who needs hope today. Because dignity still matters, and stories like this remind us why. If you'd like next, I can. Polish this into a final YouTube-ready script, create a pinned comment plus SEO title set, or write a short author's note, Tosh disclaimer slide. Just tell me how you want to close the project.